got a letter.
Tape number 3.
Finkelstein, he was the vice president of the International Union, and well, I was too. Yeah. He got a letter from Rolnick, the employer. No, he got a letter from the Chamber of Commerce of Garland, saying that they wanted to have this whole. Are you all right?
Oh, I'm fine.
This whole matter straightened out, and they wanted to invite the public to hear both sides at one time, to have it, a discussion, full discussion and debate on the fairgrounds. Risky was of the opinion that that was about, considering what had happened to, that this could happen again to another one of our men. Although I said I'm going too. If you're going, I'm going too. I wasn't going to miss something. It was going to be dramatic. And the head of the NLRB, he was a friend of ours. He had been involved in the labor board cases and so forth. He called us up. He said, Miss Lucia, I want to talk to your colleague. They knew me better than him because I had been before the board. He says, your colleague. So they talked to Finkelstein and said, I'm going to ask you not to go. Well, we can't say we don't want to go because they think we're afraid. He said, I don't care. He said, you could just tell them I said. And if you don't think that's enough, I'll call them and tell them I forbid you to go because we're going to have a hearing in a couple of days, and I don't want anything to happen that would interfere with the hearing. So that's how we got out of it. But that morning, we sent out before he called us that very day, but the night before. But that morning, we sent people out to scatter around in Garland to see what the atmosphere was, and it was just like a picnic. Selling hot dogs and balloons, and they had all kinds of people, but the couple of labor men we sent out, they were listening to the discussion. Just let him show his face. Let them show their face, and we'll show them off. So they knew that it was planned to beat somebody up. So we didn't have the meeting, and the result was that we lost the strike. The strike anyway. We couldn't get anything. They didn't want to offer anything. We didn't want to get sign a sweetheart contract, so they wouldn't let it go. People got back to people as much as we could, and that's that. No, I don't want to go into the resistol because 25 years later we picked this up. I think it was 25 years later, 58. Yeah.
You finally got him?
No, we went back to get him. But we didn't go back to him. We went back, that we heard that he was moving another of his plant from the east. They didn't know where to locate it. They knew it was in Texas, but didn't know it. So one day I was going through Texas, on my various work, and I stopped into this little town because it was a sign, antique shop, and I was crazy about antiques. And while I was there, I saw the local paper. I said, buy around it to locate here. Just as though it was made specially for me. So immediately I got up in the antique show and bought the paper and inquired. And went to see somebody in the labor home, and they said, yeah, the shop is opening up here. So I sent word to the office. Well, about 6 months later, the shop was full of people, and we started to organize. And we had luck. And he got out all the clippings that I'm showing you here. He had them enlarged, and he put down. I had a colleague, John Coolish. She was very nice and very, very helpful with me. I hope I'm not creating the impression I'm the only one that's involved. Do you want names of the others when they won?
When they're important.
Huh?
When they're important.
Because well, in this case, I think he should be mentioned because he did really yeoman's work with me. But they got the posters out saying, this is what happened 25 years ago. Same woman tried to organize us, and she's still around, When I was passing out leaflets, the boss came out. Mr. Rowley came out. He said, are you still around? I said, I could say the same thing to you. And, well, he gave us a battle. Now, Garland, Texas, and that involved Longview, Texas. This was in Longview, Texas. It was a very small town, but they had some pretty good people in the labor movement. I went to get acquainted with the labor movement, and they said they would help us. And we started to an organizing campaign. And our method of campaign takes a long time, but I think it's worthwhile. Home-to-home visiting. Getting a nucleus inside the shop that is so convinced that they want to help. That's another way of doing it. In fact, one of the main ways of doing home to visiting is very tiresome, but we used to see 2, 3, or 4 in a night, depending on how much we had to work to get their card. And getting their card was not enough, because we found out that signing union cards is not enough. The real test is when the election is held, because the moment the election is announced by the labor board is when the employer really begins to turn the heat on, makes speeches and what have you, and switches people around, makes a good many of the foremen and foreladies regular workers so they could vote and so forth and so on. So, but we won that election. We won by a substantial majority. Then came, they went to the board, they challenged the election, and the board ruled in our favor. This takes years, you know, I'm saying that in 2 years, it takes years. And finally, they ruled, he thought, well, in the meantime, while we were waiting for the decision from the labor board, we went back to the original shop and got his people. So we had them at Longview, we were going to Garland, and well, anyway, I thought there were 3 places, but anyway, we finally, after years of no strike ensued. There was no strike. The first strike was over here, the first one that was on the top. And the other 2 we won through the labor board, leafleting and continuing visiting them and so forth. So we got a fairly good contract. And it's still union now.
58, you said?
I think so, about 58, yeah.
Almost 20 years.
Quiet Rains, this is 39, still 39. Yeah, it must be in 58 because this is 61 already. Union begins talks with Bioronic, 1960. 1960. Union wins Bioronic. Adders Union wins NLRB, election and resist all. That's in 60. So you see, it took years to get it accomplished. It's not as easy. That takes care of the resisto.
I want to talk about Atlanta.
You want to go to Atlanta?
Well, is that what happened? I mean, after you finished with that, after you lost at Resisto for
Yeah. Okay, Dallas. I got some Atlanta stuff here. Well, Dallas. Sharon, oh, I see. We happen to be on the same page. Now, Atlanta. You know, when I know, but 47. We're not there yet.
Nope. You know, you've gotten World War II yet.
Oh, DeKalb. I think it's me mixed up. You know, it's DeKalb. I thought it was DeKalb, Illinois, but there's a DeKalb, Georgia.
Yeah.
And that's when I was joined the protest about Herman Talmadge. being made governor.
Oh, it's the three governors in 49.
So I joined the protesters. My name is Cal. Fruits protest anti-election. I'm getting too old to remember all these things. Oh, this is when I got the Russian doll. That's I got the protest from
41.
Toy Workers Union that I was jurisdiction. It was trespassing on their jurisdiction.
Let's talk about how you got to Atlanta.
Hmm?
Why did you go to Atlanta? Did Zaritsky send you?
Yeah, so it sends me all the time.
You got another phone call from Zaritsky.
Yeah.
He said there's another bad strike.
Well, nobody else wanted to go. I was the only damn fool who wanted to go. You know, none of the Northerners wanted to go east south. You know. But then I didn't have. All of them had a base of operation. I didn't have a base of operation. I never had a local with my strength with members behind me. You know what I mean? I'd go from one place to another. 1940. That was I was sent in 1940. Yeah. I was in Chicago when I got a call from Zawiersky that I was needed in Atlanta, Georgia. It would be a question of a few weeks.
This is where now.
Huh?
You were in Dallas in 37 around the general strike that was beat, and then then you had the resist all thing, and then you went to Chicago, or do you remember were you back and forth, or I mean you moved around a lot.
I'm getting mixed up myself.
Yeah.
I tell you what, I went to Chicago twice.
Okay. So you went. So after.
Chicago. Oh, I mentioned Chicago. It was not for the union. For this union, I went to Chicago for the neckwear union.
Oh.
This is the first time I've been to Chicago for the hatters. So that's the difference. Now I'm getting straight. Because when I went the first time, my baby was too little. I was still living in New York, you know. And then when I went to Chicago they had a campaign on the west side of Chicago. I was only there about a year. When they needed the west side of Chicago to be organized. I'm not going into that because it's very involved. They never did get it when the major contract was signed in the Loop in 35 and 36, which I had nothing to do with. But that was always a thorn in Zawiersky's flesh that the west side of Chicago had been cleared by a previous organizer, so he told me. When he left this organizer, a woman, Carolyn Wolf, I don't want to live with her. Well, she's dead at the moment. That's not nice, is it? She was told that he had made some progress in negotiations with the West Side. They weren't able to include them with the Loop at the time in the contract, and not to disturb the status quo, but merely to go along canvassing the people in their homes and building up the strength of the union. Well, apparently. Took a chance like I did in San Francisco. It didn't work out for her. She thought, I'm going to call a strike. But she called a strike in the west side of Chicago. It was a disaster. And they not only that, but they got mad at Zawiersky that he double-crossed them. So they fought very bitterly, and we lost it. Well, then years later, this was 35, and now they send me 1940. 5 years later, Zawiersky thought it's about time to see if the climate has changed, you know. So I go, and I was making some progress. I really was. It was very, very difficult. There were either Yugoslavians or Czechoslovakians, and some of them could hardly speak English very well, and they were very nationalistic, you know, and they hated the loop. So I had the loop union. So I had to tell them that they're going to have a separate charter for themselves. It would be a West Side charter. It had nothing to do with the union downtown. On the basis of that, I was making inroads when I get a call to go to Atlanta, Georgia. And I had my little girl. I had made arrangements with the family there. She was only 7, not quite 7, when I left San Francisco, and I had paid to have that little room built for her so she could be taken care of. It was a problem because every time I was changed and moved, the child rebelled. You know, I don't blame her. She had an awful childhood, a very bad childhood. And she had found a lovable woman, Jewish family that took pity on her because they felt sorry for her, and Auntie Anna was a dear, you know. I loved the child very much. But I had no more than settled in Chicago when I got this call. And I said, look, I just made arrangements. I paid money to have a room built for my daughter. I said, no, we need you very badly. It's only going to be a couple of weeks. There's no less. So when I went, it was on the eve of the strike. Well, I was...
You're really like troubleshooter.
Yeah, that's really what well, that's a troublemaker. The employers call me troublemaker, and they call me troubleshooter.
But when you went into Dallas, when you went into Chicago.
Yeah, always when there was a crisis.
Yeah.
They'd always send for me.
That would have been very frustrating. I mean, it sounded like you really liked the San Francisco thing best, where you could go in and build it up.
Yeah, I did it myself.
Right.
Yeah, but when you come into somebody else's mess and you don't know the preparation, it does make it hard. But luckily, we had a man like Joe Jacobs there, you know, in Atlanta, and he was a dear. He really was. He was a wonderful person. And he had practically done some of the organizing himself, you know, at least by his appearance at meetings and encouraging. I think there were 2 organizers there at the time. I knew there was one, but I'm not sure about the 2. And so the next morning was going to be, she told me, look, we canvassed it. I could swear that we have a majority in all of the shops, a very substantial majority. And I know it's going to be successful. What can I say, Sorla? And the reason why I was hesitant was because the people had come in in response to an article that appeared in the paper. Zaritsky had been appointed on the committee, what do they call that committee that they had during the NRA days when the setting the wage scales for
regulatory.
Yeah, but there was a word for your company after a while. And he had been in Washington, and he had met L.D. Thompson, who was the head of the American Hat Company. Now, I can't tell you anything about the strike that they had in '35. Because I wasn't involved. Joe could tell you about that, and Joe did participate. But again, the same organizer that cleared the situation in Chicago did the same thing to H.L. Thompson, because Thompson had told Zaritsky, had invited Zaritsky during the NRA days. He had met him during the hearing, and he had taken a liking to Zaritsky.
Industry code.
The industry. And he said, well, in '35 we didn't get along, but I guess I didn't know too much about you. But he said, anytime you want to come to Atlanta, you can come and address the meeting and address the people and so forth and so on. Well, what happened is that the strike was called and prepared and everything. It antagonized the man. Again, Zaritsky was called a double crosser. And once it went to that scale, there's nothing he could do about it but let it go. He can't say you can't do it. So he fought tooth and nail. Mr. Thompson, the morning of the strike, gave out, what do they call it, thing, some black checks to each men that came into scab. He actually gave it to them to use whenever it's necessary. Well, one of our key men, he was an ex-preacher too. He didn't mean to go in. He misunderstood. He thought that you could go in and come out. He went in to see who was going to escape. He went in for it. They gave him the blackjack. Well, he was going to stay the whole day. He wasn't going to be obvious about it. And he knew that was important evidence. That much he knew. That Joe Jacobs would jump at the idea of having the blackjack in his possession.
This is 30.
This is 1940.
40. Okay.
40 now. In 1937, I don't know anything
Right.
about.
Okay, this is 40. Okay.
Now it's
good.
40. And so we established picket lines, and we called a strike not only in the American Hat Company, but in Cutts Company and Standard Hat Company. What had happened? Oh, I know. What had happened was, see, I'm not coherent in that because I wasn't in the entire situation, chronological order. They had a hearing and some kind of a labor board case, and the labor board had ruled in favor of the union. And on top of that, the 40-cent minimum, or was it the 25 cent? No, the 40 cents. The code, yeah. They had been issued, and they fought it tooth and nail, and it appeared in the Dallas papers that the companies went down to fight the 40-cent minimum becoming law. So when the workers read that in the shop, they thought, what are we waiting for here? The union's trying to organize, so let's strike. So that's how the strike took place. It lasted about 17, 16, 18 weeks. I have to look it up, I forget.
This is
A
the
long
40
time.
strike.
Yeah, the 40 strike lasted about. The American was the last to sign up. Cutts settled, but didn't sign up until after the American, I think. The Standard signed first, and the reason why he signed first is, and by the way, he was decent. And Blonstein, he closed his shop because he said he didn't want a repetition of any lynching that had taken place. The Frank's case, I think.
Leo
Frank's case in Atlanta, because he said if anything should happen, I'm Jewish, they could do something to me. So he closed his plant, didn't even try to operate, which was a godsend because we didn't have to maintain a picket line there except a skeleton crew just to watch. So our emphasis was on the American Hat because we knew he was the one. He was the head of the association. He was the one that would determine whether the strike would be settled or not. So it took whatever it is. From January, from January to July. I tell you why I remember that. When I was calling Chicago to go to Atlanta, I thought, oh boy, I'm going to one climate, and I don't have to bring coat, anything. I got myself a straw hat. They were just making the straw hats then, with red cherries bobbing up and down. I remember so distinctly. And you know why I remember it? Because when I got to Atlanta, they had their first snowstorm in about 20 years. I didn't even have a heavy coat, It was just one of those freak things that happened. Right. And so we set up a soup kitchen. We had a magnificent bunch of people. Oh, they were faithful. We had violence. Oh, yes. The company gave all kinds of weapons to use. Use anything you see. Women would come out with scissors in their hands. They were the aggressor side. We had to call for help from the labor movement to come and help us on our lines. We couldn't cope with it. And the police, they were all over the lot. And then there was one girl, one scab, that was targeted. Is this good to go into that?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
She was sons as a woman. Maybe I would find it.
You tell it the way you want to tell it.
There was one girl who was a scab, and she was a pretty little thing. You'll see her picture amongst the picture. Every time she'd come out, she'd make obscene gestures and twist her, her fanny and so forth, and anger the girls. Oh, they just hated her, Alice. So so one day, I knew someday they were going to get her. They got her. And they stripped her of all her clothing. Well, I had my, I use umbrellas instead of signs. If you notice that I always have black umbrellas with, because it's rain and shine and everything else. So I folded my umbrella and I kept hitting our people because I saw the police coming. Let them go, the police are coming, let them go. So she thought I was trying to beat her up. So she began to tear my clothes and I got mad. Well, but anyway, make a long story short, the police came around, they took off their coat and they covered her up, And next morning we appeared in court, and there was a judge there who used to drink whiskey like Coca-Cola, and he used to have it in Coca-Cola bottles, So here were all our pickets came, and all their scabs came, and here we were on each side, all looking at each other, glaring at each other. So he was trying to find out who tried to close off this woman. He had the clothes on his desk, and nobody knew. See, yeah, I saw a crowd, but you couldn't tell who did it, who started it, who it was. It was a terrible crowd. Who's in charge of the strike? So I told my boss and put me on the witness stand. He gave me, all kinds of questions. I said, I'm sorry, Your Honor, I saw a crowd. He says, were you there? Yes, I was. I was using my umbrella on my own people, which was the truth that was trying to spare the girl. I didn't want her hurt. And who were the people? I don't know. I don't, in a crowd like that, who do I see? I said I couldn't tell. There were people from the labor movement and everything. So I said, adjourn to my chambers. So adjourned to his chamber. He says, now that we're alone, he said, you tell me, who was it? I said, now that you're alone, I can really tell you the truth. I don't know a damn thing. But you son of a gun, you got to, I'd fall for that sort of stuff. And so we got caught, go back on the witness stand. Then he really wiped the floor. A woman who's supposed to keep law and order and blah, 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 comes into our beautiful city and causes all these disturbances. And, but he never did again. Never did it. They couldn't find anybody. There were several arrested. They couldn't prove that they were the people that were involved. Then when they went to the scabs were prompted by Thompson to go to the city hall and protest what was happening on the picket line, because talk about mass picketing. We really had it. We used to have the whole labor movement every night that come out, And they went to the city hall to see the mayor. Mayor Hartsfield. I was trying to think his name. And while they were there, somebody tipped over a couple of cars, I don't know. What do I know? So some of our boys were arrested, and I used to send people to go and bail them out, go to the bondsman and bail them out, and they wouldn't come back, so I stopped sending people down. I got Joe Jacobs, and I said, they're keeping all our people in jail, and they're not letting them out. Well, that was another incident. Then we had an incident where one of the scabs used razors. They had razors. They used it.
The old straight edge?
Yeah, the old-fashioned razor. Right. And the fight started, and one of our boys didn't feel it right away, because in the excitement, he had been slashed all down the back, but not deeply, superficially. All his back was full of blood, and go get an ambulance, go get the doctor, go get the police, all kinds of things. Well, anyway, we used to sing the song, "Old Man Thompson ain't what he used to be, ain't what he used to be." The one with "They See Him Coming." they'd start, and they'd sing to him no matter where he went. He heard that song, and it was in the summertime, and they didn't have any air conditioning, and he had to keep the doors open, and we'd sing all his Union songs, you know, that we used to know, all day long. He said he could stand anything but the singing. I don't blame him. And that's what provoked it. And finally, to sign, he saw that it was going to continue for a long time. He might just as well get it over with. So he called Zaritsky in. First, the Standard called. He said, "Look, I don't care what the association says. I need to build up my business and keep my business. And he has scabs and I don't have scabs. I want to sign." So he was the first one to sign. And then cuts began to weaken a little bit. And then finally the American stuff. Uh, we were anxious after so many months. You know, we were keeping this thing alive with asking our local unions all over the country to submit money for payment of strike benefits and labor board cases, what have you, all kinds of, and some of them immediately their homes became due and their cars became due, and gas and electric and all that stuff, you know. And it was eating us up alive for a small union. One thing I give credit to our international union, it did sponsor and take care of the people as long as they could. And they were quite determined to see the thing through once they tackled it. Well, and we signed a contract that gave them very little, and not a union shop contract either, which meant that the bulk of the scabs. But I said, "Mr. Thompson, you won't believe me. When I was sitting in negotiation, I didn't negotiate the contract, and not that I could have done any better. Don't misunderstand me. I just sat in and listened. Zaritsky did and he was fabulous about it. But I told him one thing, Mr. Thompson, you're going to regret that you don't sign at least a union shop contract. Why?" I said, "This sounds like a threat, but I don't mean it that way. It's just a piece of advice." I said, "Because you'll be not making hats. They're going to fight unions. Each of them will clobber each other at your expense." And that's exactly what happened. Of course, with a little instigation, you know. And their lunches were thrown out in the garbage. Their coats and sleeves were sewed up and all kinds of things. And for about 6 months, the man nearly went crazy. He couldn't get his production good enough. So one day he called me up. He said, "Miss Lucia, can you get a meeting out today?" I said, "What for?" He says, "I'm sending all the people, asking them to join the union." Maybe it was longer than that, I don't remember, but a period of quite a number of months had elapsed. And when the people came, they were mad. Only I didn't have our people with me. I thought that'd be a war, you know. I said, "Just myself." He said, "I don't want anybody else but you to be there." And he said, "And tell them, make them feel at home." He said, "You know, it's a bad situation, but I'm sick of talking union instead of making hats." But they had some opposition. Those people came prepared to give me back, you know. That's why I say I was glad that for once I could. Well, not once, but that time I really didn't antagonize anybody going through the line. I really didn't. So they couldn't hold anything against me as an individual.
Tell a little about the unionists in Atlanta. Now, Atlanta didn't have any kind of, prior to about 35, Atlanta had no real union history in the needle trades. You know, some in construction, or of course railroad machinists were founded there, but not needle trades, nothing. So these are people who really been learning unionism, I guess, in the 4 or 5 years before you got in there. They sound like they were very tough. And they're really good unionists once they finally won.
Yeah, and the girls are all good. Do you know that the Southern girls were the backbone of almost every strike or every campaign I conducted? It's always the women that responded more readily than the men.
Even in the South, or
even in the South? Yes, mostly in the South. Mostly in the South, because I think that first of all, the woman is forced to think in terms of expenses and taking care of the house and everything else, And so many of those women, their husbands were nowhere to be seen, you know. So they really had the responsibility. In Texas, it was even worse. You didn't even know where their husbands were at the time, you know. I don't know whether it's changed now, but it used to be then. But they were lovely people, very warm-hearted people. Even the scabs, they wouldn't always let me in. Somehow I was used to work my way in some form or fashion. But they'd always ask you to break bread with them, and I'd never refuse. There were some places, in Atlanta wasn't too bad, but in some of the places in Texas, I was afraid even to sit down. You know, places were so messy. But I did, because I knew that it was be a slight to them. So then, let me see. Then they came. Then little by little, cuts came along. Standard had already signed. I stayed in Atlanta for a while, I think. I don't remember what my next place was. Where's my next place? 50. Oh, I had, did I get to Greenville, Alabama?
Nope, not yet. There's a folder.
In Atlanta, I want to mention Joe's participation in the Atlanta situation was really remarkable. His labor board cases and his endurance during all that time. He had some personal problems that he was involved in too, which I don't want to discuss. You probably know about it, don't you?
No.
No, well, wasn't domestic. And so, where was I? Greenville? Where's Greenville? I think Greenville was earlier. No, 46.
Yeah, we're still in 40, so.
Yeah. I'm
What
only
happened
in the
during-
40s.
What happened during the war?
During the war, I was in Atlanta most of the time. I must have been.
And you began reorganizing, like in San Francisco.
Well, I also was, of course, a Corsicana, off and on. I'd go back and forth.
So you were throughout, what was your post?
Huh?
Were
My
you sort
post-
of a roving organizer?
I was supposed to work out of my Atlanta office. I was called the Southern representative. For the title, but no money. By the way, Atlanta was good to me. You know, what I had in this house belongs to the goodness of a woman, a landlady. I was her beneficiary.
Really?
Yes.
That's amazing.
I didn't get with the Hatters Unions, and when I'll tell you about it sometime. Now let me see. What year? Oh, it was later.
I think you got Corsicanas in there somewhere. I've never seen.
What city did I just say?
Corsicana, Texas. Here's the green belt. Here. That was the Hat Workers Palace, but that's earlier. That's
This
Resistor
Resistor.
That's earlier. And here it is. Here's Corsicana, Texas.
Well, Corsicana is a long, long story. How many times did I go to Texas? 51. There's one. 51 here. I think that was about the first time I went. Everyone vote, but vote no. And that's 58.
So this must be great. Be good. Texas Military Protection Spear.
58. Well, what am I looking at? What you want is something earlier than that, huh?
Well, let's go over World War II. Let me try to get the outlines, which I think is, and especially like the people who may do the actual processing on this would be very handy for them. It has something to fit this stuff into. So, during World War II then, after you won the victory, and I gather from everybody's point of view it was a victory in Atlanta.
Yeah.
Except maybe the bosses. Anyway.
Yeah.
They were happy. So when you won there in Atlanta, so you stayed in Atlanta and you tended to go.
I had a home in Atlanta. See, I inherited this property from this woman.
And you stayed in Atlanta.
Wait a minute. In Atlanta, we had the strike, and then I was transferred. Wait a minute, I was transferred to Norwalk, Connecticut.
Connecticut.
Yeah, now I'm getting it.
I see Norwalk, right?
Albert Centel took my place. They thought the job had been done. 7442. Hatters, 42, 42, 44. Freewood, Norwalk. Norwalk, Hatters. 45. 43. Yeah, in 42, I went to Norwalk. I was asked to go to Norwalk. That there was that's the Knox and Dobbs heads.
Knox Candleworks?
No, the name was the Hat Corporation of America. But they made the Knox, the Dobbs, and the Kavanaugh hats.
Okay, and their brand was
the branding.
Knox.
Dobbs. Dobbs.
Kavanaugh, C-A-V-A-N.
Kavanaugh, C-A-V-A-N-A-U-G-H.
And this was, what, just around the time of the outbreak of World War II?
Yeah.
41.
Don't forget that during that period, too, even in the hat shops in Atlanta, a number of the women and men's jobs were taken by women because they went into either in the war or they went into the Marietta, Georgia, where they had a lot of defense work and they made a lot of money, you know.
Oh, Lockheed Bell was over there.
Yeah. Well, let me see. Now they had. I was told by Zaritsky that I wouldn't be liked by the I wouldn't be wanted by the individual I was going to help out, a landsman of mine, because he resents anybody that comes into his territory because he feels insecure about his job. So I didn't look forward to any keen anticipation to the going. But it happened to be during the war, and being a small town, he had made arrangements that I stay with the family, have a room in somebody's house. But of all homes, a German home who was pro-German. And you know, well, it was a pretty place, but she kept trying to engage me in conversation, sympathy for the German people, and I was very belligerent and so forth, so it didn't work out very well. And I told my colleague, for heaven's sakes, why'd you stick me in a home like this? I don't know the place, but being at war and in a Nazi home, well, he was pro-Il Duce himself, so what do you expect? So I went into a situation that made me just sick to my stomach, you know? And I couldn't do a single thing without asking his permission, which I had been free to do pretty much as I pleased, you know. Here I had to ask, can I call up or can I go and see so-and-so? So Zaritsky said, look, you'll have to be patient, you know. We need you very badly. There's a whole area there that needs, a lot of girls need to be organized. So we got the girls, but I never managed to get him. He said women belong in the kitchen. And after 2 years, I couldn't take it anymore, but we did make progress. We got a number of shops, and we finished the organization work in the Head Corporation of America. And I went on. I was there for about not quite 2 years, almost 2 years. I had already established a whole And my daughter was happy in the little town school, another school for her to get used to. And luckily, I had found the kind of a place, a kind of apartment that had a number of apartments in the building itself, an old building. And the people were kind enough to take care of my daughter while I was working, so that when she came home from school, she had somebody to talk to. So then he calls me and tells me, Zaretsky, I need you very badly. Where did he need you now? Chicago, I think.
Is it DeKalb?
Or DeKalb. No, DeKalb. No, DeKalb. When did I go to DeKalb?
I think DeKalb's 38. From the clippings I saw.
Yeah. DeKalb was in 38.
Okay. So World War II, so you
See,
went
that
from
was DeKalb was before Atlanta.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you went from Atlanta to Norwalk and then to Chicago? Well, that kept you moving.
See why?
There's got something else about that period. You talked before about your dealings with the government and the NLRB. During the war, you're dealing with the War Labor Movement. Okay. Well, how is that different for you for organizing? Or was there any big difference dealing with wartime government agencies?
You mean referring things to the labor board?
Yeah.
Referring?
Right.
Oh, in some places in the South, we had no choice. In fact, we avoided strikes because we were afraid of strikes. There were too many people who were ready to take the jobs, where you didn't so much in other areas. And it was even a gamble even in Atlanta, except that I was just lucky in Atlanta. Apparently, I had done some good spade work. And I was alone in Atlanta, by the way, so when I say I'm not bragging. Next time I mention any other situation, I'm going to say we, because I don't want to create the impression that this was done by one individual, I want to be very careful about that. But in this instance, Joe and myself in Atlanta, with the help of people inside, that went out with us, we did the work. Now, they were people who didn't know too much about unions, but not too bad as it was deeper in the South. The deeper South you went, the less they knew and the more prejudice, or not prejudice as much as fear. The more fear there was. Yeah, that was the point.
What's that? Religion? Role of religion?
Well, in Atlanta, we had Billy Smith, who was a very devout person. She was an arch scab if there was one. But there was something about her that made me feel that if we ever could win a person like that on our side, we really have it won, So during the strike, she was the meanest thing on two legs. But I'd always say, "Good morning, Billy. How are you today, Billy?" And she'd almost spit at me. Well, she wouldn't spit because she was a lady, but she almost felt like you should. Do you know that when the night that we had the meeting to welcome the scabs in and telling them, look, what are we fighting about? We all looking for the same thing, security, human dignity, and so forth and so on, which is a religious theme. I thought I want to use a religious theme. Why not? Billy's here tonight. So after all, we did take a lot. You take a lot, but then religion was born out of the chaos of there's violence, but not on the part of Christ and his disciples. Although there may have been times when they were provoked, and we made a hit with her. And I said, some of you weren't very nice when you came in. I extended my hand. At least I felt that was a human thing to do. So she got up. She said, "Miss Lucia, I'm one of the ones that almost wanted to slap you when you extended your hand." But she says, "I want to apologize from now on. I'm going to be a good union rep." That did it. Every time somebody talked against the union was just like slapping her, She made a wonderful secretary for about 10 or 12 years after that. Now I drifted, didn't I? Oh, you asked me about religious.
Yeah.
The religious question. No, it never was a religion. We didn't have the colored question then in Atlanta. No, we didn't. In Atlanta, we don't know. Yes, we did. But we didn't have any colored people in the hall. No, I had it with the Russian doll workers when I was organizing the other outfit.
Yeah, let's get that thing in place then. That was,
Hmm?
you did some other organizing in Atlanta
Oh,
after the hat.
Yeah, after the hat people out.
After the hat strike.
That was something
with
else. That was,
this Rushton doll, which was.
well, in between my work here and my work in Atlanta, I was in everything. I'm in the Americans and the Jewish committee. The first I brought Schlossberg from New York to the first meeting of the labor movement for the recognition, working toward the recognition of Israel for the Jews. I forgot the labor committee for Israel, I think it was called or something. So I finally got the labor movement to move its fanny from its chair, to do something way back. That was way back in 42. 'Cause I went to Norwalk at 40. I went back to, that's where we're back now.
Okay.
We went back. I went back to Atlanta in 42.
Okay.
And then stayed for a long time. Then out of the Atlanta office, that I kept working on the various things.
So you were,
now, are we at 42 or 40?
I think we got to 42 now.
We're back to 42. Yeah. I was left. I got a call to go to. Where did I get a call to go to? 42. From 40 to 42, I was in Norwalk. From 42, I was called back to Atlanta. Is that where we are?
Yeah. Is that right now?
No, now I know.
Where were you on Pearl Harbor Day?
Huh?
Where were you on Pearl
I
Harbor?
was in Atlanta, in Pearl Harbor.
So that's 41. That's the end of 41.
Yeah, I remember. It was a Saturday morning, wasn't it, or something?
Sunday.
I know it was a weekend. You know why I remember? Zariski happened to be there that weekend when Pearl Harbor. I remember the horror of space. So
So you're moving around a lot.
he used to be the kind of president that everybody loved, and people the board members would almost hug him. He knew everybody by name, Joe, and this, that, and the other thing. This one wouldn't remember the time of the day. Don't worry, it's mutual.
Okay. So anyway, so you were in Norwalk, and then at 42 you moved back to Atlanta.
I moved back to Atlanta. I got a call from Zariski again. I hate to do this to you. I know that you're not sorry you're going to leave because I just couldn't work with that guy. And besides, the work had been finished anyway. My participation had been completed. He said, but we need you in Atlanta. There's some difficulty that Joe was involved in. He wanted me to help him. And I did. And then from there on, I think I stayed on until, what's the next stop? Oh, I kept going back and forth to Greenville, to Corsicana out of the Atlanta office, so it's pretty hard to remember what follows. Now, of course, Atlanta, I've seen it grow. We also established a workers' education school. I don't know whether you came across that. Joe will tell you all about it. I was very active in it. Again, I had to go to the Labor Council and see if they would sanction it. And I was always asking them to sanction something around it. And they did. They were pretty good. Not with a little wrist twisting now and then once in a while. But I was active in their movement. And they really liked me. They said, now we're going to stop saying Yankee. We said, we used to say damn Yankee. No, so we're going to stop saying damn Yankee. We'll just say Yankee. Yeah. And I was active in the chairman of the organizing committee. I was in everything that they proposed, that was worthwhile. Even when we finally woke up one morning and found that Governor Arnold was no longer governor of that the assembly or the council, whatever it is, the General Assembly is had elected to put Herman Talmadge, no, not Herman, Eugene Talmadge, the father. Which is which? I always forget.
Eugene's the father, Herman's the son.
Eugene Talmadgean as governor of Georgia. and I protested at the council. How could they do that? They have no right. What's the sense of having an election if the council was going to supersede an election that was held by the people of Georgia? So the newspaper called it that a bomb was about to explode, but it turned out to be a dud. Of course, I appealed the decision of the chair, and people didn't, by that time, didn't know what the hell they were voting upon, and it went through. But the Americans for Democratic Action was born then. You saw a development in Atlanta, which was really remarkable. The changes that occurred, even the Mayor Hartsfield.
This would be like what, during World War II, just after World War II?
This was
or is that periodical period?
upon my return during the World War. It wasn't that much, but it was after the war. When my return.
Okay.
When I was stationed there for a number of years, then. See, I really left then from 1942 to 1956. I was operating out of the Atlanta office to all these other places, and I never saw anything change like Atlanta did. Mayor Hartsfield, I remember when I went the first time in 1940. That was during the bomb. When he called me in during the strike, and he said, the time ever comes when the Negro is going to have a vote and be recognized like a white person. He says, I'm going to take that American flag and stomp on it. I thought, my God, how can he say that to someone, I said it all, but least of all to someone that was in the labor movement. I said that day might come, but I said I doubt that you're going to stomp on it when it does come, because you'll be pushed into accepting. Do you know it wasn't long before he was the first mayor in the South to have Negro policemen? Oh, not as my result. Don't misunderstand me. I mean, as a result of what had happened in the interim, that he had to eat some of his words. And believe me, he became a pretty good mayor at that. Not too bad considering the background. And but again, I had no Negroes to contend with, except in this Georgia Workers Education School that we had. We had meetings, and we had a dance one night with black people there, and we danced with the black people, and the neighbors next door called the police. And boy, they made a ruckus. It appeared in the newspaper. Then when I became chairman of the organizing committee in Atlanta, the Labor Council. Yeah. Joe could tell you something about that too. We had a man by the name of Gossett. His name was Gossett. He was chairman of the council, but he was a crook if ever there was. He was a dishonest person.
Gossett, G-O-S-S-E-T.
G-O-S-S-E-T-T. We'll come across his name somewhere in the thing. Just not long. When we, as chairman of the organizing committee, I was very active. And
this was again during the war?
After the period of 45 after the war. And he had engineered a strike in the hotels, Gossett, but he had only called the white people. He hadn't tried to. Of course, with the black people, you're sunk. So I had a fight with him. What do you mean you? First of all, you're going to lose the strike. You can't win with just the white people. The bulk of the people in there are black. And so we lost it. But then the Rushton Dow business came, which were also colored, and he was in charge, as the president of the council. He used to have one of the black men sign the checks without filling in what it was for. So the poor man, he came to me and told me, I said, don't you sign it. Don't you sign anything that doesn't say where it's going to. And So he went back and he said, Miss Lucia told me not to sign anything unless she knows where it's going. So we had a fight with him, and I finally pushed him out of that. I said to them, he doesn't deserve to. This was all gratis work, you know. He doesn't deserve to be in charge of your situation. But we did get the doll workers. We won. I don't know whether they're still organized or not. But the toy workers then gave me trouble from New York. They called up Zaritsky and told him I was interfering with their jurisdiction. And then he gets a call from Patevsky. I was interfering with his jurisdiction. Who else? And the elevator operators, whatever organization they belong, got a call from them. In the department store union. He said, what are you giving me all this trouble for? I'm really not very coherent today. I can't remember things like I used to.
But what you're talking about, that's what you really like to operate. You like to be in a city and just be able to organize whatever came and ask.
Yeah.
I mean, that was the part that you seemed to really enjoy. You felt the best about it.
Yeah. Now I would have liked to have stayed in Norwalk. I liked the size of the town, but I couldn't stay there. He didn't want me. He was glad when I was relieved anyway of him. Now in Atlanta, what can I tell you about Atlanta? There were so many things happened in Atlanta. It really is remarkable.
I want to tell you about this European tour you took.
Oh, the Marshall Plan?